delivering negative emissions with bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, learning from the supply side. I'm really happy to be in this seminar, and I hope that I can give you some fruitful information about how we see the technology risk, how we see on the regulation around carbon capture and storage, and what challenges we see ahead of us, and also how it's important to actually work together with both the private and the public sector. I will start with this slide, which I mean, Sabine has already told you all the audience that it's needed for negative emissions globally and in Europe, and it's also, of course, a combination of different supplementary activities we need to handle. Land use change and forestry has been mentioned several times. Bioenergy, carbon capture and storage is the two ones I think has the largest potential, especially if we are looking in the Nordic countries and in Europe. But I also would like to emphasize on this slide, it takes a generation to ramp up a new industry. And this industry is actually new. We haven't today a trade with negative emissions. Today, we don't have any subsidies for negative emissions in place. We don't have a business model which are there. And as we heard also, Yvonne mentioned during her really interesting speak, is that it's a lot of questions which needs to be handled regarding a political framework, regarding also other challenges which need to be met. So there's not a room for greenwashing or transparency or other things. I will continue to the next slide here and just shortly give you a view about what is Stockholm Exergi. Stockholm Exergi is a local energy company in Sweden, located in the middle of Sweden, in the urban area of Stockholm, in the capital Sweden, and we are actually one of the largest district heating energy company in the Northern Europe. We are actually annually producing more than 10 terawatt hour of heat and electricity. We have more than 700 euros in turnover. We have an infrastructure in Stockholm, which actually is tremendous useful for also adapting new technologies. It's 1,600 kilometers of district heating pipes and district cooling pipes. And this infrastructure gives us possibilities to actually stepwise mitigate climate change. We have already phased out the last remaining fossil fuels in our combined heat and power plant. We are now looking at the next step. Today, we have a production which is based on 99% of recovered and renewable energy in our system. We have both combined heat and power plants based on biomass, and also combined heat and power plants based on waste, for instance. This gives us, of course, unique opportunities, and it also gives it's also the reason why we can see that our sector has the potential actually to create massive amount of negative emissions. And we can also see that there are other sectors which will have tremendous difficulties of reaching a net zero target. And we need also to then find sectors where we can contribute more with negative emissions, meaning that the total society can be reach its net zero targets long before, if you would ask me, long before 2050. If I continue then to my next slide, it shows just that there is a high potential for negative emissions in Stockholm, and we are definitely on track for creating these negative emissions. Mr. Bolund would have been already telling you about the Swedish government's approach of actually implementing a system for reversed auction, which hopefully will be up in place 2022 in order to make it possible to actually have negative emissions in place 2025 in Sweden. We also see that the European Union is doing a lot. The European Innovation Fund support scheme has launched its first program. We are really happy that we have passed the first step of that program, and hopefully we will succeed in the end and receive support also from the European Innovation Fund for one of our large projects, which we are actually trying to have in place already 2025. We can also see that there is a huge voluntary market growing, and I think we will listen later to a speaker from Microsoft, and there are other speakers also in the panel, which actually can see that there is a need for negative emissions in order to be also net zero, reach the net zero target. If I look at our company, we are definitely ready to become a huge supplier of negative emissions from a European perspective. And you can see on the graph to the right that the potential in just one of our combined heat and power plants is close to 800,000 kilotons annually. That reflects the whole emissions from the traffic in Stockholm during 1 year. But we can also see that if we implement the carbon capture technology, which we are working with in the whole region, in all our combined heat and power plants, we will reach a potential close to 3 million tons in the region of Stockholm. That would mean that the region of Stockholm actually could reach its net zero target long before the national target. I continue then with the Swedish perspective. The negative emission is necessary in order for Sweden to reach its net zero targets. That goes for every country in Europe also. But you can also see that even if we reduce in transport sector, in agriculture, regarding electricity and heating, there will, and in the industry as well, there will be a remaining part which needs to be compensated. And when we are talking about, of course, carbon things like land use change and forestry, there is a need also for bioenergy, carbon and capture. And we can see in Sweden that the potential actually is larger than the need we have in Sweden. And I also think that also emphasizes the need of implementing a regulation around negative emission, so it's possible also to trade with the negative emissions between countries, between companies, in order to reach the net zero target. Let me continue then with this slide, which shows our test facility here in Värtan. This test facility is connected to the flue gas pipes from our large combined heat and power plant in Värtan, which are utilizing 100% of biomass. We can clearly see, and we have proof from this test facility, that it's really well functioning. We capture more than 90% of the CO2 emissions from the flue gas, which we are today utilizing. And we can also see that it's possible actually to scale up the technology quite good. And I will point out some of the most important parts of our project regarding a carbon capture and storage facility. Energy efficiency is really important. It does matter where you implement bio-CCS. We can recover all the heat from the process of capturing the CO2 into our district heating net and then heat up a lot of people's homes. That is increasing the efficiency. We have very low capture technology risk. This technology, which we are using in our test facility, is actually a technology which has been used since the 1970s, then to reduce the CO2 content in the town gas. But today, actually, then we see that we can actually transfer this technology and utilize this for capturing the CO2 from the flue gases from combined heat and power plants. And why I mention combined heat and power plants so much is that that is the most resource efficient way of utilizing also biomass or other energy, thermal energy. We can utilize it firstly for producing electricity, and then we take care of all the heat and heat up the city. So the distribution network of district heating actually utilize all the excess heat from the process of producing electricity, or now when we are looking at carbon capture from the carbon capture process. At our site here in Stockholm at Värtan, we have a really efficient infrastructure also in place. There is a harbor in place, and we have also co-located and access and ownership of steam and electricity required for the process. Then coming back to the biomass question, which I think is a crucial question actually to address. We are utilizing the highest sustainable standard for biomass. I think this is extremely important that we actually have a more wide debate about biomass, and actually understand also that not all biomass is suitable for utilizing in an incineration plant. Biomass which we are using is actually sawdust, it's branches, it's tops from which are residuals from the forest industry. But it is also, of course, needed to have a clear view upon what is sustainable use and when can actually bio-CCS and using of biomass then be sustainable and a carbon sink. That is also when the forest is growing at least at the same amount as we are taking out forest from the we are utilizing the forest. I will then go directly to the key learnings so far. We can't see any major technology challenge regarding capture CO2. That is actually definitely possible. We can also see that the storage is not a question. The permanence will be long, more than 1,000 years, and that has also been shown in IPCC's reports. So the technology is here. But then I would see where are the real challenges then? The development of a new business model throughout the value chain requires both trust and transparency. We can't implement a system where you can discuss if we are doing greenwashing or if we don't aim to have a permanent carbon removal. There is then a need for increased clarity needed on reporting and accounting of negative emissions for nation and for businesses. And finally, but not least, of course, there is definitely a need for political support and framework required to drive sustained demand for negative emissions. When we are looking at the reversed auction, which are one part of implementing a system for remove CO2 from the atmosphere, we think it's crucial also to see that what kind of system there need to be, and it need to be a more European system, of course, and hopefully more global. The emission trading system has its advantages, but we think it's really important at this stage to separate the system for negative emissions from emission trading system. It should more be a sink and trade system, which have some mechanisms which are more or less the same from the emission trading system, but it should be definitely secure that there are no double accounting, there are no risk of actually greenwashing, and the certificates received for negative emissions can only be used once. With these words, I would like to end my presentation and say that we are ready actually to implement a full-scale carbon capture facility here in Värtan 2025 at the latest, actually. And it actually can then decrease the CO2 with more than 800,000 tons annually. In order to do that, we need to have a close collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. And we need definitely to have brave politicians who are eager to find measurements and implement supplementary mechanisms for negative emissions already now, because it will take time before we have this industry up and running so fast that we actually can secure that we reach the net zero target 2050. Thank you.